Welcome back to Bargirl Baddies. Today's story is different because it's not about one person's downfall. It's about an entire city's dark underbelly that chews up young dreamers and spits them out. Broke, broken, and barely recognizable. This is about Jake, 27 years old from Vancouver, Canada, who came to Pattaya thinking he'd found the digital nomad paradise everyone on YouTube was raving about. Instead, he discovered a city that runs on exploitation, addiction, and the kind of moral erosion that happens so slowly you don't notice until you've become someone you swore you'd never be. Jake wasn't stupid. He wasn't naive. He was just lonely and burned out and desperate for his life to feel like it meant something beyond spreadsheets and grey skies and the suffocating weight of doing everything right and still feeling empty. Before we dive in, drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from, and if you've ever been to Pattaya or seen its darker side firsthand, hit that subscribe button because Jake's story might be the wake-up call someone you know desperately needs. Alright, here's Jake, in his own words. My name is Jake Morrison, and I'm writing this from my childhood bedroom in my parents' house in Vancouver, which should tell you everything about how spectacularly I fucked up my life in the span of 9 months. I'm 27 years old, or I was 27 when this all started, and I'd been working in tech sales for a software company downtown. The kind of job that pays well enough to cover your expensive rent and your expensive life, but leaves you feeling like you're slowly dying inside. The work was fine, the money was decent, but Vancouver is brutal if you're not rich. And I was making $75,000 a year, which sounds like a lot, until you realise a one-bedroom apartment in a decent neighbourhood costs $2,400 a month, and you're spending another grand on transit and food and trying to have some semblance of a social life. I'd wake up at 6:30, commute an hour on the SkyTrain packed shoulder to shoulder with other dead-eyed commuters, sit in an open concept office that was designed to look fun, but really just meant you could never escape the noise, make cold calls to people who hated you for interrupting their then reverse the commute and get home around 7. My girlfriend Emma and I had been together for 3 years, and we'd stopped having sex about 8 months before I left. Not dramatically, not with a conversation, just this slow fade where we were both too tired, too stressed, too disconnected to bother. We'd sit on the couch watching Netflix without actually watching anything, scrolling our phones in silence, occasionally making comments about whatever show was on, but not really talking. I knew it was over. She knew it was over. Neither of us had the energy to do anything about it. Vancouver winters are brutal in a different way than other places. It's not the cold, it's the grey. Month after month of sky the colour of concrete, rain that's not hard enough to be dramatic. Just this constant drizzle that seeps into everything. Darkness by 4:30 in the afternoon. Seasonal depression isn't a maybe in Vancouver, it's a guarantee. And by January I was taking vitamin D supplements and sitting under a sad lamp and still feeling like I was moving through water. That's when the algorithm got me. I'd been watching YouTube in bed one night, Emma asleep next to me, or pretending to be, and the sidebar recommended a video titled something like, "How I Live in Thailand for $500 a Month." I clicked it because I was bored, and the thumbnail showed a young white guy, maybe 30, sitting on a balcony with a beer and a sunset view that looked computer-generated. It was so perfect. The video was 12 minutes of this guy walking through his life in Chiang Mai. Modern apartment with a pool and gym, $400 a month. Meals at local restaurants for $2 or $3. Co-working spaces with fast Wi-Fi and espresso machines. Weekend trips to islands. He talked about the freedom, the weather, the low cost of living, how he was running a web design business remotely and living better than he ever had in Austin. I watched 3 more of his videos that night. Then I fell into the rabbit hole. There were hundreds of them, thousands maybe, all these 20-something and 30-something Western guys documenting their lives as digital nomads in Southeast Asia. Most were in Chiang Mai or Bangkok, but Pattaya kept coming up in the comments and recommended videos as the budget option, the place where your dollar went furthest, where the nightlife was insane, where you could live like a king on what barely covered groceries back home. I started reading forums, Reddit threads about retiring early to Thailand, Facebook groups for expats, blogs with breakdowns of monthly expenses. The numbers were insane. You could get a modern studio apartment for $300 to $500. Eat every meal out for less than you'd spend on groceries in Canada. The weather was warm year-round. Visas were easy if you did border runs or enrolled in a cheap language school. The women were beautiful and approachable and everywhere. That last part was in the subtext of every video and post, never said directly, but always implied. The white guys in the videos always seemed to have a Thai girlfriend in the background, making food, laughing at their jokes, looking at them with the kind of admiration I hadn't seen in Emma's eyes in years. I knew what I was looking at. I'm not an idiot. I understood the dynamic, the economic reality, the fact that these relationships existed in a context of massive wealth disparity. But I told myself I'd be different, I'd be respectful, I'd actually learn the culture and language. I wouldn't be one of those gross sex tourist types. I'd be a legitimate digital nomad, working remotely, integrating into the community, maybe meeting someone real. The fantasy built itself in my head over 3 months. I'd save up some money, quit my job, end things with Emma properly, instead of letting it die slowly, buy a one-way ticket, and start over. New country, new life, new version of myself that wasn't tired and grey and slowly suffocating under the weight of a life I'd never actually chosen. Emma and I broke up on a Tuesday in March. It was civil, almost friendly, both of us relieved more than sad. She'd been feeling the same way, had also been too scared to pull the trigger, admitted she'd been talking to a guy from her yoga class. We divided up our stuff. I moved my things into storage, crashed on my buddy Dave's couch for 2 weeks while I finalised everything. I gave my notice at work. My boss tried to talk me out of it, said I had a future there, asked what I was planning to do. I told him I was going to freelance and travel, and he got this look on his face like I was an idiot, but he was too polite to say it. My co-workers threw me a going away happy hour, where everyone got drunk and told me I was brave and they wished they had the guts to do something like this. But I could tell most of them thought I was having a breakdown. My parents were concerned, but supportive, in that Canadian way where they don't actually tell you what they're thinking. My mom asked if I was sure, if I'd thought this through, if I had a plan. I told her I had $15,000 saved. I had freelance clients lined up. I'd be fine. She nodded and said she was excited for me, and I could tell she was already worried. I bought the ticket in April. One way to Bangkok, connecting through Tokyo, leaving in 2 weeks. The first few days after I bought it, I felt this rush of excitement and terror in equal measure, like I'd jumped off a cliff and was waiting to see if the parachute would open. Then the fear faded and just the excitement remained, and I spent my last week in Vancouver telling everyone who'd listen about how I was starting over, about the adventure, about the freedom, about finally living instead of just existing. The flight was long and uncomfortable, and gave me too much time to think. Somewhere over the Pacific, I started wondering if I was making a huge mistake, if I should just eat the cost of the ticket and go back to Vancouver and find another sales job and another girlfriend, and just accept that this was what life was. But then we landed in Bangkok, and I took the bus down to Pattaya. And the second I arrived, I knew I'd made the right choice. Or at least I thought I did. It was 10 at night when my bus pulled into Pattaya, and the city hit me like a physical force. The heat was thick and wet, nothing like Vancouver's cold rain, and the air smelled like grilled meat and exhaust, and something sweet I couldn't identify. Neon everywhere, red and pink and blue, signs in Thai script and English, music bleeding out of every open doorway. Girls in tiny dresses standing outside bars, calling out to passing men, "Hey handsome, welcome, come inside, you buy me drink." I took a taxi to the apartment I'd rented on Airbnb, a studio near Soi Buak Khao that the listing said was modern and central and perfect for digital nomads. The driver spoke broken English, asked if this was my first time, told me Pattaya #1 for fun, kept grinning at me in the rearview mirror like we were sharing a secret. The apartment was better than the photos. 8th floor, big windows, actual air conditioning that worked, a bed that didn't sag, a bathroom with hot water. I dropped my bags and stood at the window looking out at the city spread below me. The lights, the motion, the constant hum of motorbikes and music and life happening. I felt something I hadn't felt in years. I felt awake. The first week I just explored. I'd wake up without an alarm for the first time since university, make instant coffee with the electric kettle the apartment came with, and wander. Pattaya is laid out in a grid that's easy to navigate once you get your bearings. Beach Road runs along the water, parallel streets running back from the beach, small swa connecting them like capillaries. I found a street food cart near my apartment run by an older Thai lady who didn't speak any English but smiled and pointed at things until I nodded. Pad krapao with a fried egg on top, 35 baht, less than $2 Canadian. I ate it sitting on a plastic stool, and it was the best thing I'd tasted in months. Spicy and savoury, and somehow exactly what my body needed in that heat. I found a co-working space called Hubba Hub or something like that, air-conditioned, fast Wi-Fi, decent coffee, full of other foreigners tapping away on laptops. I set up in a corner and opened my computer and realized I had no clients lined up. That had been a lie I'd told everyone, including myself, but I figured I'd reach out to my network and drum up some work. I had time. I had savings. I had options. I met Marcus on day 3 at the co-working space. Australian guy, maybe 30, running some kind of Amazon FBA business, he explained to me over lunch. But I didn't fully understand. He'd been in Pattaya 6 months, knew all the spots, offered to show me around. That night, we went to Walking Street. Walking Street is the main strip in Pattaya, maybe half a kilometre long, closed to cars at night, so it's just people and bars and chaos. Every 10 feet, there's another bar with another cluster of girls sitting outside, wearing bikinis or club dresses, calling out to every foreign man who walks past. Music competing from every direction, techno and hip-hop and Thai pop, all bleeding together. LED screens showing sports and music videos. The smell of beer and fried food, and too many bodies in too small a space. Marcus walked me through it like a tour guide, pointing out different bar types. The beer bars were the street-side ones with open fronts, cheapest drinks, girls who earned commissions on lady drinks you bought them. The go-go bars were bigger, had stages with poles, girls dancing in bikinis with numbers pinned to them. You bought them out if you wanted private time. The clubs were for after midnight, where things got messy, where the lines blurred even more. We ended up at a beer bar on a side sway, quieter than the main strip, and that's where I met Noi. She was sitting with 2 other girls at the bar, all of them on their phones between customers, and when Marcus and I sat down, she was the one who came over. Mid-20s, long dark hair, pretty in a girl next door way that felt safer than the heavily made-up girls on Walking Street. Her English was decent, and she had this laugh that made you want to say funny things just to hear it again. She asked where I was from, how long I'd been in Pattaya, if I liked Thailand. Standard Bargirl questions. But she asked them like she actually cared about the answers. I told her I'd just arrived, that I was planning to stay a while, that I was a web designer working remotely. She said that was so cool, that she loved creative people, that most of the men who came to her bar were old and boring. But I seemed different. I knew it was part of the job. I'm not completely stupid. But it still felt good to hear. Marcus bought her a lady drink. Explained to me that's how it worked. You bought them drinks and they sat with you and chatted. That was the transaction. 120 baht for her drink, 3 times what our beers cost, and she'd get a commission. I bought her another one because Marcus was doing it and I didn't want to be cheap. We stayed for 2 hours. Noi told me about growing up in Isan, about coming to Pattaya for work because there weren't opportunities in her village, about how she wanted to save money and maybe open a small business someday. I told her about Vancouver, about quitting my job, about wanting to live differently. She listened like I was saying the most interesting thing she'd ever heard, touched my arm when she laughed, made me feel like I was charming instead of just another foreign customer. When we left, I paid my bill and Marcus, and I walked back through Walking Street toward our apartments. He said Noi was cute, asked if I was going to see her again. I said maybe, I didn't know, I wasn't really here for that. He laughed and said, "Sure man, whatever you say, but I'd be back there tomorrow night." I told him he was wrong. He wasn't wrong. I went back to that same bar the next night, told myself I was just exploring the area, just being social, just getting to know the city. Noi was there, sitting in the same spot, and when she saw me, her face lit up like I was someone important. She waved me over, patted the stool next to her, asked if I'd come back to see her specifically or if it was coincidence. I said maybe a bit of both, and she laughed and touched my arm again, and I bought her a drink before I even ordered my own beer. That became the pattern. I'd spend my mornings at the co-working space, pretending to work but mostly scrolling job boards and telling myself I'd reach out to potential clients tomorrow. Afternoons, I'd hit the gym in my building, nothing serious, just enough to feel like I was taking care of myself, like I hadn't completely abandoned structure. Then I'd shower and grab dinner at a cheap restaurant, and by 8 or 9, I'd be walking to Noi's bar like my feet knew the way without my brain making the decision. She started meeting me outside the bar after her shift, around midnight or 1 in the morning. We'd go for late-night sumtam at a street cart she loved, sitting on plastic stools under fluorescent lights, her teaching me Thai words I'd forget by morning. Aroy for delicious, Sanuk for fun, Jaidi for good-hearted, which she said I was, which made me feel like maybe I could be. We rode around on my rented Honda Click a little automatic scooter that cost me 3,500 baht a month, and she'd sit behind me with her arms around my waist and direct me to places tourists didn't know about. A temple up in the hills where you could see the whole city lit up below. A night market past Sukhumvit where everything cost half what it did in the tourist areas. A beach north of the city where locals actually went. No beach chairs, no jet skis, just sand and water and quiet. I was falling for her. I knew I was falling for her. I knew it was probably stupid and definitely complicated. But I told myself this was different. We were different. She wasn't like the other bar girls who were just working, and I wasn't like the other customers who were just buying. Marcus warned me one afternoon at the co-working space. We were having lunch at the cafe downstairs. Cheap pad thai and iced coffee, and he asked how things were going with Noi. I told him, good, really good actually, we'd been hanging out almost every night. He nodded and got quiet, and then said, "Look man, I'm not trying to be a dick, but you know what this is right?" I asked what he meant, and he said, "Come on, she works in a bar, you're a customer, this is her job." I said it felt like more than that. We actually connected, we talked about real things. He said, "Sure, they're all good at making it feel real, that's literally the job." He told me about his first month in Pattaya, how he'd fallen for a girl named Pim who he thought was his girlfriend until he saw her leaving a short-time hotel with another foreigner. He said he wasn't trying to shit on my experience, just wanted me to keep my eyes open, not get hurt. I told him I appreciated the concern, but Noi was different. He shrugged and said, "Okay man, just be careful." I didn't listen because I didn't want to listen. Listening meant acknowledging things I'd already noticed, but was pretending not to see. Like how Noi's phone was always face down on the table and she'd step away to take calls. Like how she was vague about her schedule, sometimes available, sometimes not, never a clear pattern. Like how she'd mentioned needing to send money home to her family every month, but never specified how much or what her actual expenses were. Month 2, and I was fully settled into the Pattaya rhythm. The co-working space became less about work and more about socializing. There was Tom, a British guy around my age who taught English online, 4 hours a day of Zoom classes with Chinese kids, made enough to live comfortably. There was Steve from California, older, maybe 35, supposedly doing crypto trading, but mostly just staring at price charts and drinking coffee and talking about coins I'd never heard of. We'd meet up most afternoons, grab food, talk about visas and apartments, and where to get decent Western food when you got sick of Thai. We'd joke about our situations, call our girlfriends our retirement plans, laugh about being walking ATMs, but it was always joking, always with this defensive edge. Like if we laughed about it, then it wasn't real, wasn't something we had to actually examine. Nobody talked real numbers. Nobody admitted how much they were spending. It was like an unspoken agreement. Don't ask, don't tell. Because once you started comparing notes, you might realize you weren't special. You were just another transaction in a city built on transactions. The drinking increased without me noticing it was increasing. Beer with lunch, because why not? It's hot. Everyone does it. More beers in the afternoon to deal with the heat and boredom. Bars at night with Noi or with the guys. I wasn't getting drunk. Not falling down or blacking out, just maintaining this constant low-level buzz that made everything feel softer, easier, less important. Noi started needing money. Not asking directly, never demanding, just mentioning problems that required solutions. Her mother was sick, needed medicine. The local hospital wasn't great, but the good hospital was expensive. I gave her 3,000 baht without her having to ask, felt like a hero when she teared up and hugged me and said I was so kind, so different from other men. 2 weeks later, it was her brother. He'd gotten in an accident on his motorcycle, nothing serious, but he needed to fix the bike and couldn't work until it was repaired. Another 4,000 baht. Then her rent was due and the bar hadn't paid her yet. Could I help just this once? She'd pay me back when she got paid. 5,000 baht. She never paid me back, but I never asked. Because asking would make me the kind of guy who kept score. Who didn't understand that relationships were about helping each other. I was up to maybe 20,000 baht in 6 weeks, about 800 Canadian. Not a huge amount, definitely manageable. And she was grateful every time. And the gratitude felt good, even as some small voice in my head was trying to tell me something I refused to hear. The nightlife stopped being fun and started being compulsory. I realized one night I hadn't had a sober evening in 3 weeks. The bars all started to blur together, same layout, same music, same conversations. The girls all smiled the same practice smile, asked the same questions, laughed at the same jokes. Walking Street lost its excitement and became routine became the thing you did because what else were you going to do? Sit in your apartment alone? I started seeing the darker edges of Pattaya that I'd been too dazzled to notice at first. The girls who looked too young, definitely not 20 as they claimed, working in bars that didn't check too carefully because tourists didn't ask too many questions. The old men, 60s and 70s, holding hands with girls young enough to be their granddaughters, and the girls looking through them with dead eyes while smiling for the cameras. The drugs being sold openly on Walking Street, guys murmuring, ice, yabba, coke as you walked past, everyone knowing where to get whatever you wanted if you wanted it. The fights that broke out most weekends, drunken tourists or territorial locals or drug deals gone wrong, blood on the pavement and police who showed up 20 minutes later and did nothing unless you paid them to care. I met the lifers, the guys who'd come for 2 weeks and stayed 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. Leathery skin from the sun and the alcohol. Dead eyes that had seen every version of the same night 10,000 times. Stories that started strong but trailed off because they'd told them too often to care anymore. They'd sit at the same bars every night, the girls knowing their drinks without asking. Everyone going through motions worn smooth by repetition. One guy, British, late 40s maybe, told me at 3 in the morning while we were both too drunk that he'd come to Pattaya in 1998 for his 30th birthday. 2-week holiday from his job in London, his wife and kids at home. He'd met a girl, fallen in love, or what he thought was love, came back a few months later for another visit, then another, then told his wife he wanted a divorce, gave up everything, moved here permanently. That was 25 years ago. The girl left him after 6 months once the money slowed down. His kids didn't talk to him. His ex-wife remarried. He'd worked teaching English for a while, then online customer service. Now he was doing nothing, living off a small pension that covered his cheap apartment and cheaper lifestyle. He told me all this with no emotion, like he was reading someone else's biography, and then he ordered another whiskey and asked the bargirl if her friend was working tonight. I looked at him and thought that won't be me, but I felt something cold in my chest. Marcus disappeared in month 3, just gone. His stuff cleared out of his apartment, not answering messages, nobody knew where he went. Someone at the co-working space said he'd gotten into trouble, owed money to the wrong people, had to leave fast. Someone else said he'd just run out of cash and had to go home. Nobody knew for sure, and after a week of speculation everyone stopped asking because Marcus wasn't special. He was just another guy who'd come and gone, and Pattaya had seen 1 million of him. His disappearance fucked with me more than I wanted to admit. Marcus had seemed solid, had his business, had been here longer than me, knew the ropes. If he could just vanish, then what did that say about the rest of us? About me? I started doing the math I'd been avoiding. I'd arrived with $15,000, about 20,000 Canadian, figured that would last me 8 months to a year if I was careful. 3 months in, and I was down to about 8,000. The apartment was $450 a month, so that was $1,350. Food was cheap if I ate local, but I kept gravitating to Western restaurants that charged Bangkok prices. The bars added up, $30 a night at minimum, more if I was buying drinks for Noi and her friends. The money I was giving Noi directly, which had gone from occasional to regular. I wasn't being careful. I was bleeding money and pretending not to notice, because noticing would mean changing something, and I didn't want to change anything, because despite everything, despite the growing unease and the drinking and the financial anxiety, I was still telling myself I was happy. Noi was around less in month 4. She'd say she was busy, visiting family, helping her mother, running errands. She stopped meeting me after her shifts, said she was too tired, needed to rest. When she was around, she was distracted, phone constantly buzzing, her attention somewhere else. I knew she was seeing other guys. I knew it the way you know things you refuse to acknowledge. I'd seen her tagged in Facebook photos at restaurants I'd never been to with her. One of the other girls from her bar had let something slip about Noi's Farang sponsor, plural, then covered her mouth and changed the subject. When I tried to talk to Noi about it, she cried and said I didn't trust her, that Thai culture was different, that I was being jealous and controlling like every other foreign man who thought he owned her just because he bought her a few drinks. I apologized. I actually apologized for being suspicious, for not trusting her, for being that guy. I gave her 10,000 baht to prove I wasn't trying to control her, to show I supported her, to buy back her affection. She took the money and thanked me, and was gone the next day for a week with no explanation. The co-working space crowd had thinned. Tom got deported, something about his visa and working illegally, and he was gone within 48 hours. Steve stopped showing up. Someone said he'd gotten arrested. Someone else said he'd just moved to Bangkok. Nobody knew for sure. New faces cycled through every few weeks. Young guys with excited eyes and big plans, and I recognized myself in them from 3 months ago, and it made me want to warn them, and also made me resent them for their optimism. I started drinking earlier, beer with breakfast, because my stomach hurt and it helped. Day drinking at beach bars, pretending I was working on my laptop, but really just watching the ocean and thinking about nothing. By the time evening came around, I was already 3 or 4 deep, and the night was just an extension of the afternoon, which was just an extension of the morning. I gained weight and lost weight in cycles I couldn't track. My sleep schedule was destroyed, passing out at 4 in the morning and waking up at 2 in the afternoon. I stopped going to the gym because it felt pointless. I stopped video calling my parents because I couldn't pretend everything was great and I wasn't ready to admit anything was wrong. My savings account was under $6,000. 4 months in, and I'd burned through $9,000. The math was simple and terrifying. At this rate, I'd be broke in 3 months, maybe 4 if I tightened up. And then what? I had no job to go back to, no apartment, no girlfriend, nothing waiting for me in Vancouver, except my parents' guest room and the humiliation of admitting I'd fucked up. But I couldn't leave. Leaving meant admitting defeat. Admitting Marcus and everyone else was right. Admitting the whole thing had been a fantasy. So I stayed and drank more and spent more and told myself I'd figure it out. Something would change. It couldn't continue like this forever. I was wrong about that last part. The breaking point came on a Tuesday in month 5. I woke up at 4 in the afternoon with no memory of the night before. My wallet was on the floor, empty except for my Canadian debit card. My phone was at 8% battery, dozens of messages from numbers I didn't recognize. There was a bruise on my ribs I couldn't explain, and my knuckles were scraped like I'd hit something or someone. I checked my bank account and saw 2 ATM withdrawals I didn't remember making, 4,000 baht each. I checked my messages and saw I'd apparently agreed to meet someone somewhere. Details I couldn't parse because drunk me texted like English was my 4th language. I sat on the edge of my bed in my underwear in the heat with the air conditioning broken again and realised I had no idea who I was anymore. The guy who'd arrived in Pattaya 4 months ago with plans and savings and optimism was gone, replaced by this hollowed-out version who woke up at 4 in the afternoon not knowing where he'd been or what he'd done. I thought about my ex-girlfriend Emma back in Vancouver. Probably happy now, probably dating the yoga guy, living her life without me in it. I thought about my parents who I'd been lying to for months with carefully edited photos and cheerful messages that bore no resemblance to reality. I thought about my co-workers who'd said I was brave and probably spent the last 4 months feeling validated that they'd stayed in their boring stable jobs instead of throwing everything away for some stupid fantasy. I wanted to call someone, to reach out, to tell someone I was drowning, but I couldn't because everyone had warned me and I hadn't listened, and now I was exactly where they predicted I'd be, and the shame of that was worse than the actual situation. So I did what I'd been doing every day for months. I took a shower, I put on clean clothes. I went to 7-Eleven and bought 3 tall boys of Chang. I sat on my balcony drinking beer in the heat, watching the city below me buzz with life I was no longer part of. And one told myself tomorrow would be different. Tomorrow I'd get serious about work, about money, about figuring my life out. Tomorrow I'd stop drinking so much, stop giving Noi money, stop pretending I was still in control. But tomorrow came and I did the same things I'd done today, which were the same things I'd done yesterday, which were the same things I'd been doing since I arrived. Pattaya didn't care. The city kept spinning, kept extracting, kept offering exactly what you asked for until you realised what you asked for was the thing destroying you.